Hello, good afternoon if you're in the UK. Welcome to the Connected Leadership Podcast live. This is our third recording in 3 days with a real variety of guests and conversations that we've had this week. The Connected Leadership Podcast itself is on a break until February, but I'm taking the opportunity to get some episodes into the vault so that we're all ready with plenty to go when we start up again in the new year. So we had on Tuesday we had Nobel laureate Bob Lefkowitz. Fascinating conversation, absolutely brilliant conversation on storytelling and use of humour and mentoring, as well as his amazing career and what it felt like to win a Nobel Prize. Yesterday, we had a really enjoyable discussion on how much of your personal life you can share with your professional contacts, with Kelly Molson, who shares her story very publicly, her battles with IVF and becoming pregnant, and Paulina Tenner, who decided to share her life as a burlesque dancer with her business contacts and her 50 staff, and you know what you could take from that. And today we're going in a different direction again, so three very different conversations, all of which I hope add richness and give you ideas to move forward with your career. We are broadcasting live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And if you are listening live, like Leon van der Helm, then please feel free to say something in the comments. So, Leon, welcome. I don't believe we've met before, or that we've seen you on the broadcast before. If it's your first time, I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope that you join us for future conversations as well. If you want to share where you're listening from, then please feel free. And if you want to add any comments throughout my conversation today with Lesley, it will be great to have your input. I have to have one eye on the fact that we're recording this for an audio podcast, and I don't want to disrupt that conversation flow too much, but I also love to engage with people who are listening live. So if you have any comments, please do add them in. If you want to know whether you are actually listening live, because I know sometimes people think they are, but they're actually watching it back, it's now just gone 3 UK time on Thursday. I think it is Thursday the 9th of December. Has a quick look at my calendar, because I have lost complete track of days and times this week, with workshops in Asia and podcasts with people based in America. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I do know the weekend is getting close though. So that's what we're doing. This is our third in the week. It might be the last live broadcast of the year. I have mentioned earlier this week, we have one other possible live broadcast on Tuesday. I believe that's Tuesday morning around 10 o'clock if it goes ahead, but we're just waiting to confirm that. As soon as I've got the news, I will pop it up as an event on LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube, so keep your eyes open for that. If we don't, thank you very much for listening, for engaging with all of the live streams this year. So on to today's podcast, and my guest today is probably one of the people I've known longer than anyone else in my journey in professional speaking. I joined the Professional Speaking Association in 2003. My guest today was president of the Global Speakers Foundation, probably not long after that. Maybe she will tell us when I bring her on screen. Someone I met very early in that journey, and for me was very much a role model for what I wanted to achieve, and remains so. She made her name as an expert in personal branding, probably one of the people to really establish personal branding as a concept that's now something that's part of almost every business curriculum. But back then, Lesley was, I think, one of the few people in the world that I was aware of that was talking about the topic, and made great strides in the UK and beyond with her book Walking Tall, which came out under another name in the US. So I'll have to ask Lesley about that as well, just to remind me. And her business Walking Tall has gone from strength to strength. She relocated a number of years ago from the UK, and she's now a proud citizen of Carmel in California, where I'm sure it is a damn sight warmer than it is just outside London in the UK. Lesley, welcome to the Connected Leadership Podcast.
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So what year were you president of the Global Speakers Federation?
That was 2013,
Oh,
2014.
so it was quite a while after I joined then, actually.
Yep,
But
yep,
we were on the board together for a year. You were a guardian of the PSA when I had my first stint on the board,
that's right.
and yeah, you were very much one of the elite when I joined. One of the people that we all aspired to, and you've been in Carmel for a few years now, 6 or 7 years.
We live just outside Carmel, a place called Marina. Carmel's close enough for me to get to because I absolutely love it. So we moved over here in 2014. So just at
2014.
the end of that was quite a year, the end of my Global Speakers Federation presidency, and had a book come out the following year, and it was all a bit of a roller coaster. But we moved in November, and it was a big challenge, and it was a huge move, and it's still a challenge. It's like it was like starting again at the time, and I hadn't anticipated how much the all the stuff that you teach actually in
Yeah.
connected leadership is so important. And after all those years of being in business in the UK and traveling internationally, having to start again when you move to another country was a bit of a shock because I didn't expect it to that level. Nobody knows who you are. You've got to build those
Yeah.
connections again. So a lot of going back to the basics. So your stuff was very useful at the time.
Well, that's great. And from what I've seen from the work we've done together and the conversations we've had, you certainly seem to have established yourself over there now, and you're a proud US citizen. Is that right?
Yes,
And
yeah, earlier this year,
yeah.
yeah.
And loving life over there now. So you've settled, you've got your network, and the business is thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. But the weather is great, but it's raining today. You'll be
Ah,
pleased to know. It might make you feel a bit better.
we've got
That's
blue
good for us.
skies. We've got blue skies here. I went for
We've swapped over.
I had a very early start, so a 7 a.m. start. So I treated myself to a nice hour-long walk at lunchtime in blue skies.
I,
But it was chilly, I must admit, biting wind. But I don't mind that weather. So you published this book that you're very well known for, Walking Tall. You established, from where I look, you established personal branding, or you're a core part of establishing personal branding as a key concept. And I think it's not what we're talking about today, but I think that it's linked to what we're talking about today, because you've expanded that idea really into, you know, how you can use those principles to establish yourself as a leader in any type of organization. And what we want to focus on today is entrepreneurial leadership, the traits that leaders in larger organizations can learn from entrepreneurs, and how you can use that mindset effectively to take a different route to the traditional traditional route of a leader, style of a leader in a corporate environment. So let's start with that. Why is this important, and how important is it for a leader in any size of organization to create that entrepreneurial mindset? And what do you mean when you talk about an entrepreneurial mindset as well?
Yeah, it's quite a journey really. When I think back to the days of Walking Tall and establishing that, it was all about projecting yourself authentically. And I had a different take perhaps on personal branding to what a few people did, where it started in the US. But it's always been about how do we project the best of who we are authentically and consistently, that brings out those real key differentiators. And over the years, all of that has been refined and honed in to be relevant to what's going on in the world today and what leaders need. And really what's happened, I've found, particularly in the last probably 2 to 3 years, is that a lot of the stuff that I have been teaching for years through the Walking Tall methodology is really about entrepreneurial mindset. Entrepreneurs have this mindset that has traditionally been typically different to a lot of leaders in business. But the stuff I was teaching leaders, it was really about these things of being visible, being well connected, differentiating yourself, having the confidence to speak, to be visionary, to see the big picture. And a lot of the coaching and the speaking and the training I was doing was really around these concepts. And I was then starting to hear that, corporates are telling me when they wanted to bring me in, the things that they wanted their leaders and employees, all their employees, to start behaving like. And it was these elements of, we want people to be more visionary, we want more innovation, we don't want people to just come in and do their job, we want them to be more driven. excuse me, and how do we do that? And a lot of the stuff that I was teaching, excuse me, let me just take a drink here. A lot of the stuff I was teaching was really feeding into these key areas. So I started to think, well, entrepreneurial leadership is really what we're talking about here, but it's really just evolving from the stuff that I've always taught in those areas. So what do I mean by entrepreneurial leadership? It is this thinking in a visionary way, thinking about being part of the bigger picture. What is the overall objective? How do I feed into those strategic objectives? How do I build my connections? How do I, things like how do I get great at presenting? Because that gives me more visibility and presence internally and externally. So it's not just coming in and mechanically leading a team and doing my job every day. It's just thinking a bit more broadly. So that's really the theme of a lot of what I teach today, but it's really bouncing off of what I've always done.
How does this fit with the concept of intrapreneurship? Is it the same thing? Is it the same idea? Or would intrapreneurship be more about treating your division, your team as a business? And what you're talking about in terms of entrepreneurial leadership is more as looking at you as an individual leader and taking that entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Everything that I've done over the years has been very focused on the individual. So personal branding, leadership branding, and my latest book was very much around the people element of the corporate brand. It's called Corporate Brand Personality. So I've always believed right from the start that people are what makes the brand of an organization. So when it comes to looking at how do we really reinforce that brand through people, you've got to take it down to an individual level, absolutely, to give people what they individually need to shine, to differentiate, to be clear about expertise, to build their own profile and visibility. However, part of that is obviously how you lead a team. And I've done quite a lot of work with individual team brands as well over the years within the big organizations. Yes, there's only so much you can do at an organization level when it's multinational and thousands of employees, but you can work on a team basis and help teams to develop their own team brand. But that very much is all about a collection of individual personal brands. So I very much have always focused on the individual and then look at how that affects the big picture, how that fits into the big picture.
The term that's jumping, or the two terms that are intertwined that are jumping out at me from everything you're saying so far, are visibility and branding. And obviously with your background in personal branding, that makes a lot of sense. And actually this fits quite nicely with a forthcoming podcast we've got with from someone from the world's biggest branding agency, where we're going to look very much at this type of thing as well. So there's quite a nice link between the two discussions. When you're looking at building the visibility of an individual or a team within an organization, that can lead to conflict, and it can lead, I would imagine, particularly more traditional hierarchies, to internal politics coming into play and pushback. How much have you seen of that being a problem for your clients, and how do they navigate that?
Yeah, that is a good question, because when you talk about the concept rather of visibility, you do think about people who are always there, center of attention, the loudest, have the strongest voice, and are always at every social event, corporate event, whatever it is. The way I view visibility is not that at all. So we all have people around us we know that do that. Some do it well, some don't do it so well. So it's helping people to be authentic in the way that they're visible, and that authentic thread has always run through everything I did. It kind of feels like it's overdone today, in that people talk about authentic leadership all the time, and it still comes out. People want this. Clients will often ask for this, but it's sort of overdone. But it's always been there ever since I started this. So it's not just about, well, you've got to get out there and you've got to be more dramatic when you present. You've got to go to every social event. You've got to be completely visible on social media, and you've got to be doing this. It's not that. It's finding the niche that each person is comfortable with in a way that they can be visible authentically. And there's a number of ways of doing that. And if you do it that way, it's not in conflict. And part of the work I do is looking at how teams can collaborate and bring out each other's strengths, work to each other's strengths in the team. If somebody else is pretty confident doing this thing because that's their area of expertise, they're happy talking to the media, they're happy doing that particular presentation, then maybe we do that. Doesn't mean that others don't support that and get out of their comfort zone. That's certainly not the case. But it's about that team collaboration as well, and how can you shine as part of a team. So there's lots of ways of being visible and connected without being that person who shouts the loudest and shouts from the rooftops. There was a great book by a lady called Peggy Klaus called Brag. I don't know if you've seen it. And the subtitle is called The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn Without Blowing Your Trumpet, or something like that. And it's a really great little book with lots of tips in it. It's a little bit American in places, but it's great for those introverts who want to be visible and are scared at the thought of visibility because they think it's one thing and it's not. So I've got lots of techniques to help people think about visibility. And one of the things is, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have heard this quote, but it's something that really lies at the root, I think, of a solid personal brand and being visible. And that's the quote from Maya Angelou, who once said, I've come to understand that people will forget what I said, will forget what I did, but they'll never forget how I made them feel. And if we can just think about how we make people feel, that's when we start to become visible and memorable for the right reasons, if we're doing it authentically and genuinely.
Yeah, there's I think that ties in very nicely with one of the things that I talk about, which is in any communication that you enter into, you need to be focusing on the impact on the other person, rather than, it's not what you want to say, it's what they need to hear. And even on something as simple as LinkedIn, when I do LinkedIn training, the first thing I say is, who do you want to read this and what do you want them to think, feel, say or do as a result of engaging with your profile? And it just changes our whole mindset about how we present ourselves on something like LinkedIn, thinking about our audience and the impact on them. One of the I don't talk about personal branding, but I certainly talk about visibility in terms of professional relationships and networks. And one of the phrases that I share that probably has had the biggest impact over the last few years is an extension of a phrase that I'd heard in many places. So many people are familiar with the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. A number of speakers in the US, David Averin was one from a PR perspective, who we both know, extended that into it's who knows you. And then my extension on that was, and what they know about you and what they say about you when you're not in the room. And that resonates with a lot of people. And I think that probably goes to the heart of a lot of what you're saying, in that it's not about putting yourself on a pedestal and saying I'm the best around here, but it's about getting people to understand what you stand for and why it's relevant for them. Would that be a fair summary of it?
Yeah, absolutely. We take people with us if we're transparent and authentic and people know who we really are. Another great book by a guy called Bill George is called Authentic Leadership. And he looked at what makes successful leaders today successful. And he found that, first of all, they have a clear set of values. They know who they are. They're clear about what they stand for. And I think sometimes we think we are, but are we really clear about it? Because we get bent in all directions if we're not careful. And then he found that they're transparent with those values. So everybody around them knows who they are, what they stand for, and what they think and what they value, what their principles are. And thirdly, they don't compromise on those values. That's a tough bit, especially if we're in corporate life. Sometimes we have to compromise. But if we're not focused on what we really stand for, we're not really sure when we're being compromised, and we can tend to then be unauthentic and inconsistent. So absolutely, it is those things that you're saying there, Andy. It's very much about being transparent with who we are, and it's something that we're not that great at. And I suppose that really does sit at the core of a lot of my work, is helping people to first of all identify who they really are and spending time on that and what their real expertise is, then to articulate what that is, because that's another challenge. We might be sort of reasonably clear, but then articulating that so I can use it in whatever way, form, shape or form, and then projecting that. So that's where the visibility piece comes in, very much so. And it's, one of the things I often say to corporates is the most powerful part of your brand today is what your clients say about your brand to their
Yeah.
contacts. And that's what we're saying. It's like who you know, because that's your brand. That's how people talk about their feelings and how connected they feel to a brand. They don't talk about the product so much. They'll talk about the experience in a restaurant, the experience they had when they flew that airline, and that's what gets talked about, good or bad, and that builds the brand.
Yeah, there's a lot that you're saying that resonates, and a lot where I want to dig deeper. I have to choose which path you offer me to follow next because there's so many different ones.
Mm.
I can see we've actually got quite a crowd watching us on the live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So if you are watching live, please put a comment in the comments underneath the video. Tell us who you are, where you're listening in from. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to build them into the conversation with Lesley as well. I think that the path I want to follow, and I'm going to bring two together because I think they're very closely aligned. In fact, almost three together, but we'll get to that. And that is authenticity. Authenticity is a word you've mastered better than I have, but you've said a few times. And in addition, you said earlier it's almost become overused, and then you've gone on to use it probably more than any other word. When I wrote Just Ask, I almost went back and did a word search on all my interviews because I would say authenticity was the word most used in the conversations I had in researching the book as well. And I'm a great believer that words can be overused and phrases can become cliches, but typically it's for a good reason and it's because they're important. And so I don't tend to deride them for that. I think it's because we have to pay attention to them very often. So let's look at authenticity, and I want to look at it in combination with something you touched on towards the end of your last answer, which is values. Because I think if you understand your values, you understand what is authentic behavior for you a lot more clearly. And if you understand your values, you understand the path that you want to follow or you need to follow, the message you need to communicate a lot more easily. Now, I've done values courses, particularly with our mutual friend Joe Medwell, but I'm not an expert on values. So tell us more about how you approach values in the work that you do and what people listening can do in order to really engage with that concept and use that to drive more authentic behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that people often think they know what their values are, and they don't really. And one of the techniques I use is, well, there's a number of techniques. I'm just going to write something down so I don't forget that. But, sometimes when we can think about stuff that really annoys us, that really frustrates us, that screws us up, drives us mad when someone says something, does something, doesn't do something, doesn't say something. Think about the things in your life that really do drive you mad, drive you balmy, frustrate you, anger you, and then flip those over. And that will often give you what one of your real principles or your values actually is. So, for example, if somebody continually is late coming into a meeting, so 10 minutes late, every meeting you have, they're coming in 10 minutes late, really drives you mad. Take note of that. Be mindful of that. Flip that over and say it might not be a value of punctuality for me personally. It might be about respect for other people's time. That's the piece that's driving you mad. It's the lack of respect for other people's time. So that could be a very strong value for you if you look at it like that. And I always remember a story of a very well-known actually CEO who was coaching at the time. It was CEO at the time of a very large nonprofit, global nonprofit. And she has now moved on to something else. But she said to me, she's a very good presenter. We were working on her brand. And she said to me once, I've not always been like this. I've not always been extrovert like you might see me now, or loving to present. She said, back in my school days, she said, I was very quiet. And I was about 17, and it was time for, I don't know what's wrong with my voice today. Sorry, Andy. I'll get there. And she said it was the time for the next head girl to be voted in. And she said there was no way I was going to go for that. It wasn't me. I was quiet. But there was this girl that was obviously going to get it. She was tall and blonde, attractive, bubbly. Everybody loved her. So it was obvious she was going to get it, but she wasn't necessarily the best person for the role. And she said, and for some reason, I don't know what it is in me, but at the time, she said, I stepped up and I decided to run for head girl. I don't know where it came from. I just did it. And she got the role of head girl. And we were talking through this, and she said, and that's at the point when I had to learn to present, because I had to do lots of presentations for the school. And we got talking about this, and it came out that when we did the work together, that one of her strongest values is fairness. So she will do anything for the value of fairness for her. And when she thought back to this running for head girl, it wasn't necessarily fair that this girl was going to get the head girl position. It wasn't necessarily fair that was a foregone conclusion. So she fought against that and did that. And that's become one of her strongest values more openly. And that's what she lives by today. So sometimes we have to think about what drives us mad in the world, in our day-to-day life, and flip it over.
It's a very simple approach to understanding and uncovering those values, isn't it? And it's turning a negative into a positive as well. But I think that once you understand those values, there's a feeling of liberation in terms of, you know, that you're following a path that is going to suit you, is going to make you happy, and it's going to bring out the best in you as well. One of the things that the other path that I wanted to bring into this conversation on authenticity and values, we're recording this just before Christmas as one of 3 episodes, or the third of 3 episodes in 3 days. The episode that we recorded yesterday, if you're listening to the podcast, it may well have come out last week, was with Kelly Molson and Paulina Tenner, and we were talking about how much of your personal life you can share with your professional network. And I think this is very closely allied to your personal brand and to what we're talking about today. So Kelly has become a very well-known spokesperson for the TTC, the Trying to Conceive community, and took on a mission to stop people asking women at conferences and events, you know, do you have kids? You know, because you don't know what's going on in the background, for example. Paulina is very open about having been a burlesque dancer, about sexually liberal views, and you know, both of them have come to the conclusion, and I tend to feel the same way, that if you don't like it, then maybe we shouldn't be working together, which is easier for us. You know, we own companies. I posted a post on LinkedIn yesterday that was a satirical take on what's topical as we broadcast this live, what's going on in the UK with the scandal over whether there were Christmas parties or not at 10 Downing Street last year during lockdowns. And actually one of my friends, who's an accountant, messaged me and said, that's really funny, but is it for LinkedIn? And I said, actually, for me it is, because a core part of me, my authenticity, is satire. Political debate, but with a sense of humour. And whether you are in favour of our government or against, you could still laugh. And if you can't, maybe we're not destined to gel together. And I think that that's quite an interesting battle, as you know, as an entrepreneur. So I'd appreciate your take on that. And it's a question that I asked Paulina and Kelly, and I'm going to ask you as well, because I think it fits with this entrepreneurial leadership mindset for people working in large organisations. Is it easier for people who run their own businesses to make those decisions about how much of themselves they reveal? Or is it something that we should all consider strongly because it's our personal brand and it's a core part of it? And in search of authenticity, we have to find the right balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that possibly it is easier for us. We don't have to be accountable to managers and bosses in the same way. We are accountable to our audience and who's going to book us to share our message. So it's possibly slightly easier, but you're absolutely right. It is a core part of what I bring in to any of the teaching that I do, whether that's a keynote, training, coaching. It's that personal story, those personal experiences that actually help to give people a much clearer view of what our brand is and understand what makes us tick and what we stand for. And if we think about the way I help people with this, if they work in a corporate, is that any corporate today needs to focus on that personality of their brand. Consumers today want to know a bit about what you stand for. It's no longer good enough just to partner with or buy from a company or work with a company for a company when you don't know anything about them. That's becoming more and more important to people. And the way we can do that is by bringing out individual stories. And again, that word authenticity, that who are the people that work for us. So I very much help people work on that individual background story. The story of fairness for the CEO I just worked with. We developed the story for her that she shares, so people actually understand what she stands for. And as a leader, that's really important for her. Don't come to me with stuff that's not fair. Fairness is a driver for me. So this is telling people this is who I am. So that personal story is really important to a level that we're comfortable with sharing it. Absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that I'll often start a workshop with is to have people share something that not many people know about them. They'll do it in small groups. And it's amazing how powerful that is. First off, they have license to share something that they've never felt comfortable because it sounds like I'm bragging, so they can do that. And secondly, it's people are going, wow, I would never have thought you would have done that. And that tells you so much about that person that we would never normally get. It's a really important factor. And while it is slightly easier possibly for us running businesses, I don't think that's an excuse for people in corporate life. I think definitely they need to be bringing that side of their brand out.
Yeah, I've run similar exercises. I've had a whole range of games based around finding out about the individual behind the job title over the years. Most of them inspired by someone I was talking to you about off air, Jackie Barry, who's just put out a book on all these games that you can create within workshops. One of them, which I think Jackie introduced back in the day when I was running networking groups, BRE, and Jackie was one of our area partners, was a snowball fight. You've just reminded me of this story where it was around this time of year, everyone had to write down on a sheet of paper, a scrap of paper, something about themselves nobody else knew, and then scrunch the papers up into snowballs. You have a snowball fight, and I've done it many times since. And on one occasion, you basically pick up the piece of paper nearest to you when the snowballs finish flying around, and you read it out to the group, and the group has to guess who it is, who it refers to. And we had the wonderful moment of it was when we did the networking groups, one of the male members picking up a scrap of paper and reading out, "I'm pregnant and my partner doesn't even know yet," which was probably my favourite. But what I have seen when people do this exercise, and I've run it since then with many corporates, is that the quality of conversation between individuals in the room is elevated. Because people are interested in the person rather than the job title. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, particularly who work in larger organisations, because they feel they're less able to share a bit of themselves. So let's look a bit further into that difference between the way entrepreneurs behave with professional relationships and the way that people in larger organisations do. Do you think that entrepreneurs engage with their networks and build those networks in the first place in a different way, with a different mindset than people who are working in a leadership role in a larger organization?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. Of course, that's a generalization, but yes, I do, absolutely, because entrepreneurs really understand the value of connections and being visible and being themselves and being able to share who they are and building those relationships. I think the relationships thing is the most important thing. Whereas people in corporate life generally don't have the same need to do that. They have a job that they're there to be paid to do, and they don't always see the value in building those relationships. And so, yes, I do believe entrepreneurs do it better. So that's why that's part of my teaching. But the value for people in a corporate, the important thing to get across to them in terms of the value of this is that it serves the business better as well. Because there are individuals who'll say, well, I'm quite happy being a back office technician and I don't need to build the relationships at all. And that's what I do. But if you can make it about them and their career and how it helps the business by bringing this element of personality into the business, and I can share all of the research around that and all the theory that I have around that, then it helps people to engage with it with a little bit more, rather than, okay, well, maybe this is important for the business, but also for me. Perhaps it is important for my next career move, or if I really want to get on that next project even, that it might help if I am a little bit more visible and connected, and people in the business know who I am and a little bit more about my expertise. So if you can often find with individuals, if you can get to the what's in it for me factor, so what is it you want to achieve? It might not be that next big promotion. It might be that project that I've always wanted to work on, or going to work in that country. Then let's look at building your visibility plan around that. But the ultimate thing is that the business today is all about that personality piece, is people understanding you as a business and what you thrive and what you stand for and what you thrive on as an internal culture. Yeah. So that's why any business today cannot ignore this piece around personalities and individuals and personal brands within the business. There was a guy I worked with whose name has escaped me right now, but worked for IBM. And he recognized several years ago, actually, that building his personal brand within the business was really good for the business. And I wrote an article about this a few years ago called A New Wave of Branding. And it was about individuals within a business given the tools and the techniques to develop their own really strong individual personal brand or leadership brand that helped them as individuals, but also helped to give a new dimension of personality of the business to the external world, which was needed then. It's very needed now, and it was quite early stages. And this guy, IBM, had done just that, and IBM supported it because they saw that his personality within IBM was going to be part of the IBM brand. So they were very happy to support that brand externally as well. So, it's there. It's an integral part of business today. We can't just hide behind it because we work in the corporate world and say that's not for me.
I might be wrong here, but it sounds very much like a former podcast guest, Andrew Grill. It wasn't.
That's it, Andrew. Thank you for that. I should have written that down before. Yeah,
and there's the power of personal brand, because as soon as you started talking about him, I thought that sounds like Andrew, who was on our podcast early last year. Last year, I think. Or the year before last, if you're listening to the podcast in February. Always difficult pre-recording at this time of year. That's thrown me off where I wanted to go. Yes, I know where I wanted to go. You said that you could share some of the research, and I think this is important because for years I've been saying to clients, I've had clients come to me and say, we want you to encourage members of our team to network more. To go out and it might be sales. It might not be sales teams, but it might be they want their team to generate more sales. And people are thinking, well, that's not part of my role. And what I've almost invariably said to clients is, let me start by talking about why it's important for them to network for their career. Mm-hmm. And if they get that, then they'll do it for the business happily, because it becomes natural. If you ask them to do it for the business, then you'll get resistance. So I think we're clearly of the same mind when it comes to that. I had a wonderful moment when I used to just simply say, you won't progress in your career. You won't get the job that you want. You won't get the promotion you seek if you don't have the network. And I would always meet resistance. And then I came across, so I'll share the piece of research I use. We'll see if it's the same piece. But I'm always interested in new ideas around this. There's some research by a guy called Harvey Coleman, very famous piece of research called Pi. And Pi was some research Harvey Coleman shared in a book he wrote in the late 1990s around factors that went into promotions. And the three factors he shared were performance, image, and exposure. Now, the pushback I was always getting was people were of the opinion that if you do a good job, you get the promotion. And yet in Harvey Coleman's research, performance accounted for 10% of the factors of promotion. Image was 30% and exposure was 60%. And if you put that into plain English, if you do a good job, that's great. But if nobody knows about it, you're not going to get considered for the role. But if you do a good job and people know what that job is, in other words, image, what people know about what you do, then you're more likely to get it. And then if the right people know, and enough of the right people know exposure, you'll secure the promotion. So when you explain it like that, it makes more sense. That pushback has gone. So
Yeah, yeah.
tell me about the research that you've come across and can share on this.
Well, similar. I mean, a lot of the research I do, I mean, having been at this now for 20 odd years, I often say, my research is interactive. I can see the results from the people I work with and the promotions they get because of the work we do on their visibility, their profile, clarifying and identifying and articulating what their differentiator is, what it is they really do, and then helping them to project that. So I see it all the time in the work that I do. And that for me is more powerful than any piece of research that I might read in a book. But similar one, Ellery Sampson in her book called, I think The Image Factor, did a similar thing. And it was 10% career factors, three biggest factors in career progression, 10% down to doing the job, 30% down to attitude and behavior, which I relate to personal brand, and 60% down to visibility and exposure. And you can break that down and say exactly that. You can prove it. It's not just throwing statistics out for the sake of it. Yeah, it's great. If you don't do a good job, you're not going to be around for long anyway. It's just a prerequisite now that we do a good job. It's not enough to get you to where you want to be. And that's the same with leadership. You can be a good leader, but if you're not really thinking about what differentiates you, what you're an expert in, and how you build that visibility for yourself, you may just stay where you are doing that job. And maybe that's okay. But actually, people often, you can get into that inner driver, that compelling reason why I need to do something. What does it give me? And that's the piece at which I actually start, especially when I'm coaching, is let's look at the objective. What is it that we need to achieve here? And why? What's the compelling reason for this? What's your driver? And that can take quite a lot of time to pull out of somebody, because it's so often about that they can't really get into the internal thing. What does it give me if I achieve this? But once you get to that point of this is what it gives me, then they get it. And then we can put the plan together to build the profile, the visibility, the brand, and all the entrepreneurial leadership techniques that are needed there. So it's very much about the what's in it for me. Companies need to really wake up to that. We're not talking sort of sheep dip training anymore, leadership training, going on a management program and everybody doing the same thing. There are many companies still doing that, but I'm finding more and more they're wanting something a little different. I did some work for Heriot Watt University in Dubai a couple of weeks ago. They very much recognize that they need to be doing something different with their internal leaders and educators now as well. It's not just this, well, let's just put a standard leadership program together and do this. What do people individually need? And that's the way I think we're going. It's very much individual, personality, entrepreneurial mindset. Let's give people what they need as a person.
Okay, let's change tack slightly. I want to pick up on something else you talked about much earlier, another thing that I think you mentioned 3 or 4 times, and that's presentation skills. And funnily enough, despite the fact that it's what I do for a living, i.e., deliver the talks rather than teach it, I don't think it's anything we've really talked about on the podcast before, and maybe it's worthy of a full episode at some point. But in terms of this, the topic we're looking at today, the entrepreneurial mindset for leaders in larger organizations, do you see a difference in the way entrepreneurs approach delivering presentations and people in larger organizations? And what are the key creases you're ironing out?
Yeah, I do. I do see a lot of difference. And I think presenting often comes down to confidence, and that can be tapped into in so many ways to help people with confidence. So certainly, generally, entrepreneurs will have the confidence to present what they're presenting about because they truly believe in the content. Yeah. They're absolutely clear about the differentiation and why this product, this content is important, and they have the ability to share stories often better, or they have the confidence to share those stories. So generally, there are a lot of entrepreneurs obviously who have to be trained to present well and put a structure presentation, but generally the confidence is there because they are so clear about the differentiation and the message that they're sharing, which is why they've started out in business in the first place. They truly believe in a product or a service or whatever it is, and they start from a point at which they are clear that they are bought into that. They truly believe in it. Sometimes that doesn't always happen in corporate life. So yeah, and the stories there, and I think this is one of the things that people in the corporate world often will struggle with, is how to build in stories to presentations, and they are so critical to delivering a compelling and engaging presentation. If we're just delivering facts and content, people could zone out because they can't absorb everything. You give them a story that really backs up the point you're making, lets people really live it in a visual way, hear an anecdote or an experience that you've gone through that they can relate to, then they start to sort of play a movie script in their head a little bit more, and they remember it and they engage with it, and they can sort of download it to the hard drive a little easier than just going on to the next point and the next point and the next point. So I think entrepreneurs generally are a little better at doing that. Some are brilliant at it. And so that's very much a technique that I use in coaching to help people present. It's so important to personal branding and entrepreneurial leadership, is being able to present a message clearly.
Yeah. And I say we haven't covered it on the podcast. We did a podcast on storytelling with David McQueen and a former VP of Disney right at the very beginning of the podcast. And then very, very recently with Bob Lefkowitz, the Nobel laureate, we talked a lot about how he used stories to mentor, to talk to his patients when he was a doctor, and to interpret data. And some fascinating stories from him. And he was telling stories all the way through our conversation. Some very interesting stories about how you use storytelling effectively to look at data from different directions, for example. So there's a lot that we can build in there. For me, it's something I believe in a great deal. I'm going to throw one more word at you, then I've got one more question to wrap up. Well, I think we could go on forever on this. I think we feel like we're scratching the surface, but there's two things I want to cover. So the first one, it might be a bit of a curveball. It's sort of come again. It's not a word we've used in this conversation. It is one of those words that gets used a lot, but I think it underlies a lot of what you said. So how important is passion in an entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah. It's an interesting. I do think it's important. If we come across as indifferent to with what we're talking about, then you're never going to engage people to listen to what you're saying, take people with you, influence people. So I think passion is it's really important. When we're talking about a topic, whatever it is, we need to get that in. However, I hesitate, as you can tell, because I've seen over the years many people saying, as long as you're passionate about something in a business, it'll be successful. And I really don't believe that's the case. There's a lot more components to it than that. Or as long as you're passionate about the topic you're talking about, and there's some very valid topics out there. Maybe, there's a lot come across like being kind in business. Great, that's great. Is it really going to, if you're passionate about that, is it enough? You've got to have the business message there as well. So there's a number of ways of looking at passion. I don't think it's enough on its own, but I don't think you're going to be as successful in getting your message out there and successful in business unless you have it. But it's a combination of things as well. It's making it real, solid, taking people with you. And perhaps the passion will come from building in some of the stories and the experiences and the background and that dimension of you as a person that people don't always get to see. There are ways of building in passion without it being over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also picking up on your point that there are people who run very successful businesses or work for very successful businesses selling products and services that as a bystander, and I'm being very careful not to give examples here for fear of offending, but as a bystander, you think, how could anyone get passionate about that? And sometimes it's not the passion about the product or service, it's the passion about the job you're doing to deliver it.
Yes, or the difference it's making to the people that you're delivering to. I often talk about, it's the end result of what it is you deliver. And if you're passionate about the results you get from allowing people to understand the technique, the service, the product that you're selling or sharing, or the idea you're trying to influence with, then that's when you get the result. And that's when you're making it about the audience and the other person rather than you.
Great. Okay. So the last thing I want to ask you is, you've got a phrase that you use around this whole entrepreneurial mindset journey, and that is thinking outside the brand. I want to dig into that a little bit. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of that, but it really comes back down to branding today is, and I've been saying this for many years, but it really is so relevant today. It's branding today is not just about the logos and the websites and the sponsorship and all the marketing collateral that millions of dollars get spent on. And of course we need to have that, because we've got to build the brand awareness for our business, whatever that might be, or a product. So that is important. But today, branding doesn't stop there. For me, it's that piece, that's the piece in the middle. There's a whole ring around that, a glue and a strength that holds all that together. And that's the people. And that's the personality of the brand. That's the piece that gets talked about. That's the piece that people feel when they work with you through interactions with people. That's the piece they talk about. They talk about on social media. They'll talk to friends about. And that's what builds our business today from referrals and the connections that might come in because of that. So it's outside of this branding piece of the thing that we all think that branding's all about. And I still get people come to me and say, I heard that you do branding. And I'll say, well, tell me what it is you think I do, and let's just make sure we're on the same page. And sometimes it'll be about, about logos, or you'll help me with the website. Yeah, we can help with I can help with the content for that, but I don't do that side of branding. I leave that to the experts who are brilliant at that. But there is a piece beyond that comes before the brand. So often people will say to me, well, I've got my brand already. What do I do now? And is it too late? No, it's not too late. We can still take the brand you've got, if it's a small business, and look at how you inject that personality into it. Or some companies will look at refreshing their brand or rebranding, and then great, yes, we can look at that. But you can't take away the personality piece today. That's what's going to make you different. That's what's going to make you successful in business, because that's the piece that people engage with more than anything.
So the competencies are a prerequisite, as we said earlier, but it's the personality that really makes all the difference, and that's where the entrepreneurial leadership mindset probably lies, if I can summarize it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a nice way to round it off. That's why it's important to business, not just for the individual.
That's great. Lesley, I really appreciate your time. I knew we've known each other for a long time. We've worked together, you bringing me in or me bringing you in on things many times over the years. You never fail to fascinate and to deliver. And again, today, I'm delighted to have invited you on. So thank you for joining me on the Connected Leadership podcast.
Thank you, Andy. It's been fun. It's always good to work together. Thank you very much.
So thank you to Lesley. We had a really good crowd listening in, but you were all very quiet. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took value from it. If you do have any comments, post them below, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn or Facebook. Lesley and I would both love to see your take on this, your perspective on this, and engage with you there. We may well have that branding expert with us on Tuesday morning. I will post that event as soon as I know for sure. If not, it will be earlier the new year, I'm sure. And we've got some great live streams lined up for January as well. So as they say in all the best places, watch this space. But in the meantime, if I don't come back on a live stream before the end of the year, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you for supporting the Connected Leadership podcast.